All right, the Endangered Species Act. That's another one you've all heard of. And before we get started, I'm going to tell you something, and I hope you're sitting down. I really do. I really hope you're sitting down because you're going to just be blown away when I tell you that the bald eagle is no longer on the threatened and endangered species list at the federal level. The president, that's our national bird, right? And for years and years, it was protected under that statute. But recently, I mean, I think it was last year, it was delisted because the preservation efforts over the last 30 years have been successful, which is a good thing. Now, don't go out and start, hurting these animals because they still are regulated under a statute that specifically applies to bald eagles, and they are also regulated under the Migratory Bird Act, which is a treaty between the United States and I think Canada. And they are protected there. I mean, the ones that I think of most there are these Canadian geese with all the mess they make all the time. I mean, I don't know why we regulate those things, but I guess if you're a Canadian goose, it matters. I guess you get some protection that way. I haven't been a Canadian goose in a long time. But the concept of the endangered species, there's a picture of the eagle. But all right. Anyway, the concept of the Endangered Species Act is there's a list of animals that are they're either deemed to be threatened or they're endangered, which has a slightly different connotation. And the amount of protection that they're afforded depends on whether they're considered to be threatened or endangered. And when there are federal actions and other actions that can in some manner cause harm to species that are on this list, then this list is implicated and the protections required come into play over here. That's basically the program. There are ways of getting species that are identified on properties listed, recognized by the government. There's certain protocols that have to be followed. So in other words, if you think that there's an endangered species on a piece of property and you want the government to know that, there are certain protocols that are in place for you to provide that information. In other words, you can't just call them and say, I think I heard a red-shouldered hawk. I've heard it once before. It sounded like that. So please mark that on your inventory of species and locations. There are certain very, very specific protocols that have to be followed in order to do so. And if an animal that's on this list is taken, is affected, the word they use is there's a taking. That if you know environmental regulation, a taking can mean something entirely different dealing with property rights, but it's also used in this context, and it applies when an animal generally has been killed or severely affected as a result of human activity. They tend to call that a taking in that business.